Social psychology. As we think about aggression, we have to start by looking at what's the definition of aggression. And so aggression is any physical or verbal behavior intended to cause harm. And now we have to remember that there are different kinds of aggression. One is hostile aggression. That tends to be what we think of the most. And that's aggression that springs out of anger. And the goal of hostile aggression is actually to hurt someone, to inflict some type of harm or to injure a person. But then on the other hand, we have another kind of aggression that's more instrumental aggression. And instrumental aggression is when you have aggression that's designed to reach some other end. So you may think about having two-year-olds playing with balls. And so one 2-year-old has the ball, the other one feels like he wants the ball. So he walks up, smacks the kid, takes the ball. So now hitting the kid and taking the ball would be the aggressive act. The aggression of hitting the kid wasn't because he wanted to hurt the kid, but it was because he wanted the ball, and that was the way that he knew he could get the ball. So that aggression would be considered instrumental aggression. So it wasn't because I'm doing this because I'm mad at you and I want to hurt you. I'm doing this because I want this ball, and the only way to get the ball is to take it from you. So again, we call that instrumental aggression. And so when you think about what is some of the theories of aggression, we can start by thinking of aggression as a biological phenomenon. And so instinct theory and evolutionary psychology talks about this innate, unlearned behavioral pattern that is exhibited by all members of the species. So this biological aggression. And so now as you think about that, you're going to think about some neural influences. So there can be these abnormal brains that contribute to this abnormally aggressive behavior. And when we think about aggression, we think usually about the amygdala and the role of the amygdala in aggressive behavior. But now there's another part that you also need to think about, and that's the prefrontal lobe. And so they've done studies and looked at some people who tend to be more aggressive have smaller and less active areas of their prefrontal lobe. And that prefrontal lobe is the area that should inhibit aggression. But in these people, it's not doing that. You can also think about some genetic influences in aggression. So heredity influences the neural system sensitivity to aggressive cues. And so that can result in a person behaving in more aggressive ways. So now, along that same line of looking at these biological phenomena, there can be a biochemical influence in aggressive behavior. And one that we often think of is alcohol. And so introducing alcohol can increase aggression or be associated with elevations in aggression due to reducing the person's self-awareness. And so you're less aware of yourself and your values that say, this isn't appropriate. It can also cause people to focus more on whatever it is that they feel like is provoking them. It can also be associated with just aggression, so that people think about the angry drunk. And so you just associate being drunk with being aggressive. Other biochemical influence can be testosterone. So there tends to be a correlation between levels of testosterone and aggressive behavior. And so now what kind of correlation do you think this would be, negative or positive? So it's actually a positive correlation. So as that testosterone goes up, that aggression goes up. So one thing they have to think about that is females who tend to have less testosterone would tend to have less of the aggression. But also as men age and that testosterone levels out or even starts to decline, the aggressive behavior will also tend to decline as well. So another biochemical influence is a poor diet. So thinking about what you eat can contribute to or can inhibit your aggressive behavior. So foods that are high in omega-3 fatty acids tend to help with your brain functioning. So again, as you think about your brain impulses and how your brain can be involved in controlling your aggressive behavior. So calcium helps guard against impulsivity. So the idea that that you can have people address their diet, so have more of the omega-3 fatty acid, have more calcium to help them better regulate their aggressive behavior. So as you think about biology and behavior, you have to kind of think about it that it's an interaction. So it's not just one or the other that's going to cause this aggressive behavior, but it's going to be the interplay of the two that are going to cause behavior. So now, that whole frustration aggression theory has been revised over the years to try to better fit with what the research and stuff it talks about. So the original theory about frustration and aggression kind of overstated that whole connection between frustration and aggression because we are thinking beings. We don't just whenever we get frustrated act out. So again, frustration tends to produce anger, so an emotional readiness to be aggressive. So the theory is designed to explain hostile aggression, but it doesn't do a good job of explaining instrumental aggression. Because remember, with instrumental aggression, I'm not trying to hurt you, I'm trying to get something. And so again, this idea about being frustrated and acting out or becoming aggressive doesn't quite fit with how we see instrumental aggression occurring. So now, as we think about, what are some of the theories behind aggression, we also need to kind of think of aggression as a learned social behavior. So we've talked about, the idea that there can be some biological components. We've talked about that there can be some chemical components. But we need to also think about how does society and how does learning play into our behavior when we choose to be aggressive. And so The idea of social learning would help us to think about how are aggressive behaviors rewarded and reinforced. And so the answer would be that through our personal experiences and through our observations of other people, that we learn that being aggressive can pay off. That, we see people who are out there being aggressive and they come away with things that we want or things that we don't have. And so we can see that there can be a reward. So thinking about some other influences on aggression, one is aversive incidents. So there are different aversive incidents that we experience that tend to increase the likelihood of acting out in aggressive ways. So being in physical pain, people tend to act out more aggressively. In psychological pain, people tend to act out more aggressively. What do you think heat has to do with aggressive behavior? So when they looked at heat and looked at like big cities, so you'll notice that like in some of the big cities when it gets really hot, crime rate goes up. And so there seems to be a connection between heat, temperature outside, and aggressive behavior. Now, some people have said, well, wait a minute, it's not really the heat that contributes to the aggressive behavior, but the idea that when it's hot, people tend to be out more, and especially when you're in big cities where people are more condensed, more crowded together. You got a lot of people who are out, a lot of people are interacting with each other, and then they kind of rub each other wrong because you're having more interpersonal interactions, so you would expect more interpersonal conflict. So they say it's not the heat that's causing it, but the heat may be correlated. So remember we can't about the cause versus the correlation. So the heat doesn't cause you to you get hot and you start fighting, but it's that the idea that when it's hot, people get out and they interact, and there's more opportunity for personalities to clash. So that's the other thing. The other idea is that an aversive incident of being attacked or feeling attacked can contribute to aggressive behavior. Because often when we feel like we're being attacked, we tend to lash out on who or whatever is attacking us. And now that could be physically attacked, but that could also be verbal attack. So like if you're being insulted by someone, that there could be more of a tendency to lash out. And when we lash out, we may lash out physically aggressive, but we also may lash out with our mouth. And so remember that being aggressive, we don't have to just hit somebody, but we can be aggressive by, gossiping about people. So you piss me off, I'm gonna spread this rumor and tell everybody. Or, it may be that you piss me off, or I feel like I'm being attacked or threatened by you, and I'm going to tell your deepest, darkest secrets. We were friends for a long time, and I know some dirt about you. And so that's still considered an aggressive behavior because it's my way of attacking back or lashing back out at you because I feel threatened by you. So now, related to that, the story with the two students, the idea about aggression cues. So the idea that the violence is more likely when aggressive cues release pent up anger. With the delinquent kids, he sees that being pushed is that a cue that that someone's being aggressive toward them and that they need to turn around and lash back out. And where the A student, who turns around and says, "Okay, who's trying to be funny?" then they wouldn't see that as a cue to be aggressive. So part of this whole distortion about sexual reality is that the whole notion about aggression against women. And that women want to be aggressive, that women want, when we say no, that it doesn't really mean no. We just want you to kind of step it up, and show that you really want it. And that's not the case. So that people have some really distorted views about women, and that gets perpetuated with the current generation. And so studies suggest that the exposure to violent pornography tends to increase punitive behavior toward women. And so just watching this stuff tends to negatively influence that dynamic between males and females. And so as we think about media influence, we can kind of talk for a minute about television and the internet. And so the idea that what we see on TV affects our behavior. And so there's a correlation between TV watching and behavior. So the frequent result of correlating children's TV viewing with aggression is that more violent the content, the more aggressive the child. And so now people like to say, oh, no, you're talking about video games. Oh, no. The reality is that the studies are showing and have shown for quite a while now that the more violent the content, the information is that the kids are watching, the more likely these kids are to act in an aggressive way. And that can extend to indirect aggression as well. And so kind of remember that in a lot of situations, you have children who are watching television unsupervised because that parents have working and having other things that are competing for their time, and so the children tend to spend a lot more unsupervised time watching television. We've talked about with development, a child's brain is not fully developed, and so that whole prefrontal lobe where they're going to be making some of those decisions, where they're going to regulate some of those impulsive behaviors, is not as well developed. And so at a time when they're not really cognitively able to make some of the fine distinctions, they don't have adults who have more developed brains there to give them input on what they're watching, then kids are more likely to be influenced by some of the things they see on TV. So, why does TV viewing affect behavior? Well, one is we talked about arousal. So when we watch television, there's certain programs, or if they're involved in some of the video games, there's a certain amount of hype, there's a certain amount of arousal, and we've talked about how that arousal gets associated with that emotion, that aggressive behavior, and then that can increase the likelihood of aggression. There's the idea that viewing violence disinhibits a person. So you're going to be less inhibited to act out on aggressive behavior yourself. And also the idea that some of the media portrayal tends to evoke a certain amount of imitation. So they've done studies where they've talked to people who are criminals in jails, and the idea that many of them talked about some of the ideas for how they would do their crime they got from television programs or from movies, from the media, and that in some cases the criminals actually tried to imitate what they saw in the media on how to commit the crime that they get caught for. So now we kind of touched on the idea about video games. So just kind of a final piece on video games. The idea that the games kids play tend to become more violent and often include such violent acts as carjacking, shooting, sex or rape, and murders. And that now they have these games that are rated M for mature, but they tend to be marketed in the way that the images are done and the marketing tends to really be more for younger people. So really not for the mature people. So now, as we think about other influences, think about that whole issue of group influences and how group participation or group belonging can influence aggressive behavior. So, groups can amplify aggressive reactions partly by diffusing responsibility. So, if we increase the distance and the number of people involved, people tend not to feel as much personal responsibility when it comes to aggressive behavior. And so, an example is that they talk about lynch mobs. And so, the more people who are involved in different lynch mobs, when they look back historically, the more vicious these murders and the mutilations could be. And from that, they conclude that it's because when you have a lot of people there, and you feel like the responsibility is not directly on you, that people tend to engage in more aggressive behavior. So again, a social learning approach is one way that we can look at how to reduce aggression. And so again, it's looking at controlling aggression by counteracting the factors that provoke it. So you're going to try reducing some of the aversive stimulation associated with aggression. You're going to try to actively reward non-aggressive behaviors. We're going to try to model non-aggression. And you're going to try eliciting reactions that are incompatible with aggression. And so we might try to give clear rewards and consequences for aggressive behavior. Some of the very effective work that's been done with aggressive adolescents has looked at giving clear rewards and consequences to aggressive behavior, has looked at making sure that the aggression is not rewarded. So a kid who acts out and then you let them get what they want just so they'll stop acting out, no. That's rewarding. So we're going to have a clear consequence for the behavior. But then they also look at getting them to engage in non-aggressive behaviors. So like how would we get them to take part in what they call pro-social activities? So if I have you out doing something that's positive and interacting with pro-social peers, those pro-social peers are going to be modeling, again, non-aggressive pro-social behavior. And so and the activity that we would have you engaged in should be something that you would enjoy, that's going to be fun. So in that sense, it's rewarding in and of itself. And so by structuring um, the environment so that non-aggressive behavior is rewarded, non-aggressive behavior is modeled by others in the environment, and aggressive behavior tends to have consequences, then you can take a very social learning approach to actively control aggressive behavior. Have a good one.